What is a game? What is a game?
A system of reward and punishment.
A system of rewards and punishments, yes. What else is it? Oh, something with cake in its mouth, yes. What is a game? Fun? Yeah. What else is a game?
Challenging.
It's a system of achievements and penalties that functions around our human need. No, that's why a game works. So what is a game? A game is an amusement, a pastime, a diversion. That's from the Collins Dictionary. It is a contest with rules, the result being determined by skill, strength, or chance. So it's not just walking down the street with your mate, it is a contest. And there is always a winner, and that means there's always a loser. And a game is also, could be a single period of play in such a contest. So the Olympic Games have a number of games within the whole thing, which is the Olympic Games. It can be a game of football, which is part of the whole derby thing. It can be a game of rugby, although that tends to be called a match. And a game is the score needed to win the contest. That's also in the Collins English Dictionary. So I think the answer to the first question, if you're really going to be honest about it, is most concise, is number 2. It's a contest with rules, the result being determined by skill, strength, or chance, and there being a winner. So that's the answer to this first question. And now the second question is describe gamification. Does anybody know? It's a word that's being used all the time. What's gamification?
Turning everything into a sort of game, but with the giving you motive to do something.
Adding game mechanics into games.
There you go. Adding game mechanics and game design ideas to things that aren't typically games. And that is the answer to that question, number 1. Very good. Now, why would a company add gamification? I think you set it up in the corner. You said to increase engagement, because the whole idea behind games, and the reason that we play them over and over again, is we're engaged with them. Why would a company gamify that process? Is to make it more engaging, right? So now a lot of companies don't do that very well. They just say that the loyalty card is a way of gamification, or they've been gamifying sales rooms. If you ever have the horror of having to work in a sales room, they'll have the targets, and they'll have the person that sells the most wins a trip to Hawaii or something like that. That is a very common way of gamification that a lot of companies do. You'll find it especially in sales companies. They tend to use it a lot because selling again and again, telephone sales especially, are very boring. So this is their way of trying to make it interesting. Also, they're starting to use gamification a little more in health as a way of trying to keep people engaged. So you've got these Fitbits. You've got different things like that around fitness, things that you can wear, wearables, things that you can do. You can compete with your friends. You can post things online. All of that is the part of winning and losing. Now, why do we like winning? So if we go down, we scroll down here again. I don't even know if that's a question on the thing, but it is important to know that the reason that they're engaging is that we as humans, in order for us to be socialized and not kind of all want to go out and live in our own cave, is we have to be sensitive to the needs and wants and moods of others. And this is this is also ties into success and failure. We want to be successful at hunting because that means we get to eat, and we like to eat. We you know, if we fail at socializing in our society and we're exiled, we don't have friends, we are lonely, and then we might freeze to death, we might starve to death. So these reward systems and our need to be successful and not fail is part of who we are as humans. So that's what games tie into. And when you think of how old games are, I mean, people were playing, the Olympics started in Greece thousands and thousands of years ago, and before that they had games. checkers and backgammon, I think, goes back centuries as well. You know, people have always been playing games. It's something that we've been doing since we were first human. And monkeys play games, chimps play games, animals play games with each other. It's just something maybe just having to do with being alive. Now games are, one of the key things in a game is reward structures, and reward structures keep you playing, because you want to get that reward. And if you were in my class, that is basically what a game is. It's what do you like to do, what kind of activity do you like to do, and what are the rewards. And the rewards will keep you coming back for more, like mice. However, if you never gain any mastery, if the game is too hard, you'll just get frustrated. So what is the big difference between a game and an app is, with a game, you've got to do your user testing. You've got to get the balance right between challenge and reward. And when you do get that balance right between challenge and reward, you start achieving my game for 1.5 years. And I finally now have, just through making small adjustments to the mechanic, the music, the background, just very, very small adjustments again and again and again, and watching people play, I've noticed that now about half of the people that grab the game, that are in the room, they grab it and they just start playing. And some people will put it down, and they're usually the people that are in charge of the money and stuff, and so they've got to listen and make decisions. But the other ones, they just keep playing. They turn the volume off, but they don't put the phone down, and they just keep playing the game. And then when they lose a level, they go, and then when they go, yay! And they don't have to tell me anything in their questionnaire. I can tell by watching them that they are completely engaged in this mechanic that I have made. But it is the same mechanic that I started out with, but all I have done is vary the tempo, vary the music, vary the backgrounds. I haven't actually changed the mechanic, which is just a swiping mechanic, but I've changed the speed to little tiny things. With an app, you have a list of requirements that your customer wants, or that your client wants, that your user will need. You fulfill those list of requirements, you do some nice colors, you do your data protection, and you've got something that will fulfill a need in the marketplace, and that is relatively simple to do. A game is a lot trickier because you must engage that player, and it's a developer-player interaction that has to happen, which is why games have communities. You don't really see a community forming around a specific app, but you will see communities forming around certain games. And it's because of that engagement with the whole process. Now, when you do pass and get success and get that mastery, what you are is, you're winning the game and you're getting the prize. But what that does is it releases dopamine. And dopamine is why you smoke joints, why you might snort coke, why you like having sex, why you do everything in your life that you do that's fun. I'm not saying drugs are fun, but that's why people do them. Is because it releases dopamine. The same thing happens when you win the game and you get the prize. This also isn't going to happen when you have an app. An app is going to have a series of requirements, and you might get a rush when, oh yes, I managed to buy that dress. It was out of stock in my size everywhere, but here it is online and I can buy it. That will make me feel good, and it'll give me a dopamine rush for a second until the dress arrives and it doesn't fit. But it's, that has happened, right? That is what it is, it does, and then you can't send it back because it was on sale or whatever, you lost a piece of paper. Also, one thing that I found quite interesting is that imagining the reward increases the release of the chemical of dopamine in subjects. So if you play the first few levels and you get a reward, then you think you're going to keep playing and you're going to get that reward again, but you don't. I don't know if people play Candy Crush. Candy Crush actually has that programmed into it. So you'll play, they kind of take how long you're playing, and so you're playing and you're getting through and you're getting through, and then suddenly you lose. And then if you don't play the game for a while after you've had that loss, when you come back to it, you will play and you will suddenly win. And that's because the analytics behind the game have figured out that how long it's been since you haven't been there, and so they make the game easier for you. So if you play a lot of Candy Crush, it gets harder and harder and harder a lot quicker than if you don't play very often. So this is, and what they're doing is they're managing the release of your dopamine. Because if you know you're going to win at the end of every level, you don't care anymore. The game becomes too easy. It's just that challenge you have to lose, and then you go, oh, I'm going to do it again because I want to win. I want to get that dopamine rush. So again, it's not, you can't just feed the mouse the dopamine every single time, or he starts, like a heroin addict. The heroin addict will take whatever they take for a little while, and then it takes more to get the same kind of rush, and that's because the dopamine, your body thinks, okay, well, this is going to give me this much dopamine, and if it does, then it's not exciting. If it doesn't, you start to engage. So we're kind of crazy creatures, we are. But so if you are doing a game beyond, at the moment we're really just talking about game concepts and game prototypes. But if you're actually going to build a game that takes, weeks to play, then you're going to have to manage that engagement with the player. You're going to have to manage how many levels they win, how long it is that they can keep winning, and then when they don't win, what happens, and you don't want to frustrate them, because if they get frustrated, there's stress and anxiety, they'll quit completely. So it really is a management of psychology, and we have a lady that comes into incubator who's a good friend of mine named Bernie Good, who's a cyber psychologist, and that's all she studies, is how to make people frightened in your scary games. What is scary? Teeth on a teddy bear, really scary, because you don't expect teeth to be on a teddy bear, that kind of thing. And she also talks about free to play, which is really free to play, pay to play really is what it is, but it's how and when do you hit up that player to part with their money, because they don't really want to part with their money. They want to play as much as they can for free. But even I spent money on Candy Crush, and I was determined I was never going to spend money on Candy Crush, and I got up to £5 on Candy Crush. So they were doing it well. They had, and I knew what they were doing, but I still, did it. I don't play it anymore, but it got too hard. So we've kind of got to the dopamine. Shall we go back to see what the assignment says? So I've given you a little bit about that. Now, so the 3 key elements of a computer game. Let's see of a computer game. It's the same as any game really, but let's just see what we've got here. Games. Now, the game psychology. There's 3. They impact on 3 different areas, the game psychology. We talked about the dopamine. So there's the cognitive area, and this is your mastery. This is where you try and figure out how to win the level, how to get through that corridor, how to kill that enemy, how to line up all the candies so that you get through the level and you get the fish going and everything. And then the one is emotional. And these are more games where, maybe like Lara Croft, where you identify with the hero, and and actually the character identifications in MMORPG games, there are people that identify with the characters they play in the game more than they identify with their real life friends. And this is, your presenter stopped working. So now I can tell you naughty secrets, because they won't go on. I didn't turn it off. Okay, all right. So that's cognitive. So we've talked about, yes. Now we've always got scores and rewards in our games. A lot of my students in 3rd year games try to make games without scores. And how many of you would play a game that didn't have a score? It's not a game. Oh, well, we just want you to explore. You gotta have a score. Yeah, can you imagine the Olympics with no scores, or the Olympics with no medals? What would be the point? So a score reward is not a game otherwise, it's a film. If you want to make a film, make a film. I come from the film business. Tell me a story, it's fine. But in a game, and also it used to be when mobiles first came out that there would be games where you always went back to zero. So in Doodle Jump you always went back to zero, in Fruit Ninja you went back to zero. But now people like to have levels. When you actually do manage to get through level 120, you don't want to go back to zero, because you've had to pause the game because you've had to go eat something or something. You know, so I really encourage my students to always think about in levels. Also, levels can give you a progression. So if you want to tell a story with your game, which you can, you know, a lot of game-based stories. That's how I started in the business. A way of levels can give you a structure within which you can progress the story. So that level 1 is like your intro, level 2 is like should have to include your inciting incident. I've got it all worked out, which I had to do the Tomb Raider job. I have a screenplay structure with every single act and every single scene that has to happen within a screenplay, because before I did Tomb Raider, I had 12 years in Hollywood working on Hollywood shows. And then I have that mapped out so that it matches the levels. So that I can tell you Act 1 is usually around level 6, and what has to happen in Act 1, what has to happen in Act 2, the midpoint versal, all of that stuff, and connected to what level that has to happen in. But I don't do that with first years because it's very involved and it takes about 3 or 4 hours to get through. So I do it with third years and with master's students. So reward systems, these are some reward systems that you can have. You don't always have to have points. There's a lot of other ways of offering rewards. And this is a list which you can see: score systems, experience points, items. You can gather items. I'm sure you play a lot of games where you can gather things. You can get messages as rewards, different plot animations. You can unlock a whole other level that you wouldn't get to otherwise. So there's a lot, you can use imagination in it. So there's games, that, negative emotions. Let's see what else I'm asking you. So the key elements in a computer game are there's got to be scores and rewards. So there has to be some sort of mechanic, running, jumping, shooting. There has to be some rules. There has to be scores, rewards. Levels are a good idea to have. Some sort of way, some sort of balance between the mastery and the play, so that we get that dopamine out there. So those are some things that you would need to put into any game, computer game. And the 2 basic emotional states that games work on, that we were just talking about, what did we say they were? I think it's just kind of right back behind there. The 2 emotional states are success and failure. Really easy. Positive, negative, success and failure, which would then release the dopamine. So that's your answer to that one. And then what I have is you have to do some creative work. So on number 6, you have what you have to come up with is 3 pictures, if you would. So the first one is, and it would be a very, very basic idea for a game. Some of you who were there at my Friday lecture will already have one. But just come up with an environment, which would be your first slide. Then, what is the action? What is the mechanic? Running, jumping, whatever. And then the third one, what is the win? So it's very, very simple. Describe the first slide of your game and then the third. So we have, and what happens in the second, you can put it in, or, you know, so it's very simple. It would just be a really little level. It could be a platformer. It could be you start out here, you jump on a platform, and then you win some candy, or just come up with something, use your imagination. You can, if you're in my class before, you can use the game that you had to do that. And then the last question, I think, oh, okay, right, no, we got a couple more here. Which engine would you use to make this game? Do you guys all know what game the biggest game engine is at the moment?
The biggest Unreal Engine or something.
There's Unreal, yeah, there's also the one we use is Unity. And all games these days are made either on Unity or Unreal. So, but have a look, just go unity.com and have a look. It's a free download, you can just have a look and see what it does. There's also a number of different, there's also Scratch, there's also Construct 2. Let's see if I've got a list here. All right, so here we go with the slide 1, slide 2. The opening slide of the game, where does the player begin? What is the landscape? Where is the villain? You can do it with circles and stickmen. You can just do it with text and explain it. Then slide 2 is the game mechanic. The player is moving this way, then X happens, then Y happens. And slide 3 is how that level ends, what's the victory, what's the score and the reward, just to get you thinking that. So that's the answer to that question. And let's go back to what engine, just put in Unity. Unity 3D, Unreal, there you go, you got it. And the standard game production management system used in the industry it's called Agile, A-G-I-L-E. And what that means is instead of, because earlier I was talking to you about that the games, the player and the developer are engaged in this biofeedback loop, where the player has to be challenged just enough, but shouldn't be over-challenged, and so the game has to kind of adapt to the player has to adapt to the game. That means there needs to be lots of testing. You can't go ahead on your own idea and build a game that costs millions without testing it on some users, because they will always give you information you weren't expecting, and they will always play the game in a way that you don't imagine they possibly could. So the Agile system structures the whole system of working so that you plan on, you're going to work for 4 weeks and then you're going to test it. So what that means is that the artist and the coder and the audio and everyone is working to the point where it will all be put into the game engine, and then it will be deployed to a mobile phone or a tablet, and users will be able to play with it. Previous to that, you could work for 2 or 3 years on just the art and then on just the coding, and they would put it together at the very end. But what would happen is often it didn't work, it was glitchy, players didn't like it. I think there's a game out right now made by Peter Molyneux that players just don't like because he didn't do enough testing. So the Agile method, what it does is it's very transparent. Everybody knows what everybody else is doing. The teams are quite small, and each team, instead of being 5 coders working together, you will have a coder, an artist, a level designer, an audio person, and perhaps a narrative writer, and they will all work together to make level 1. And then there will be another team of similar size, perhaps working on level 2. And then you put them all together and you would test them on users. And this is called Agile because it is agile. It's not stuck. It has a lot of movement in it. So that is the answer to that. And it is called an iterative way of working. Agile is another one. Another word, because the key to the Agile system is something called Scrum, and that is where your entire team stands up and tells each other what you're working on, what the problems are, and so that's called a Scrum. And now the whole Agile system is also called Scrum. So if you were to put Scrum down, that would be correct as well. So that's the standard game production management. And the primary tools used in this production method are, as I said, Scrum. They also work with user stories. So instead of saying we're going to put guns in the game because we like guns. We say, as a user, I want to be able to use a gun at this point. As a user, I want to be able to jump over this. So we're always thinking about what the player wants rather than what I want. So what is unique about this system, it's not unique anymore, it's actually used in all kinds of software development and everything as well now, is that it's a very player-centered, user-centered way of producing software. And that's so the tool. Another thing we have production backlog. That's a word. Stakeholders is a term. User stories is a term. Sprint. A sprint is if you're saying we're going to build it and we're going to test it. March 14th is our deadline because we're going to have a demo. Then the work between now and then is all rated to what do we have to do to be able to show it to people on that day, and that's called a sprint. Because it's not the whole work cycle, it's a portion of that work cycle. So the words we have are, we have Agile, we have Scrum, we have user stories, we have backlog, we have stakeholders, we have sprints, we have iterations. So those are 7 words that are used. So you can, any 2 or 3 of those will suffice to answer that question, and then add any questions that you have. So if you got any questions, that's pretty much that will be your assignment, and that is a flying overview of games. And now we can go if you want. If you got questions, anybody got questions? No? No?